guys, welcome back to our channel. I'm Callie.
I'm Brittany.
So today we're going to talk to you about our top 5 favorite series that we read in 2019. We both read a fair amount of series and loved a fair amount of series. I know for me, finding just 5 was rough. So
it's entertaining.
Shush. So we classify series as having 3 or more books associated with, so we did exclude any duologies or potential duologies in these as well. For me, I know I picked all of mine are series that I finished, but Brittany...
Not yet.
Yes. So, mostly finished as well. So, not really strict lines, just mainly that it had to be a series and not a duology, because then I would have had a really rough time. So, I think we're going to start off with the book that made both of our lists, and that is going to be Illuminae by Amie, Kaufman, and Kristoff. We read this for one of our first book of the month.
Wasn't it?
I believe so. I believe this was our first book of the month that we started with our channel, and we both just fell in love with it. So Illuminae is kind of like iRobot meets Contagion in space.
It's awesome.
It's glorious and wonderful, and I know for me, I really liked it because of the way it was written. It's not written as a narrative, it's written by case files all put together, and I thought that that was so unique and imaginative, and it made it more immersive to the actual story.
I really enjoyed the uniqueness of the story itself, and then each book kind of kept you guessing on what was going to happen, who was alive, who was dead, and the reveals, and I thought it was just really interesting, some of the concepts that they brought into the sci-fi world as well, which I really enjoyed, because I wasn't sure if I was actually going to like something that was completely left field of what I'm used to reading.
Yeah, it was definitely very different, but very worth the read, I think.
Agreed.
So the next one on my list is 3 Dark Crowns by Kendare Blake. The final book came out in September, 5 Dark Fates. I've been following this series since book 1, and I've been in love with it, eagerly anticipating each September for the next book. I love this series. It's dark, it's twisted, it's everything I could ever ask for in a YA story. So this follows 3 sisters, triplets, who are destined to be queens, but on this island, this matriarchy, only one gets to be queen, and they have to kill each other for it, and it's just dark, and there's so many concepts and so many aspects of this book that you don't anticipate, and if you think, like, I'm telling you it's dark, whatever you have in your mind, make it darker. That's this book. It's so well done, it's so well written, it's very atmospheric. You're on this island surrounded by mist, and like there's some mainland somewhere through the mist, no one knows. And it's just wonderful. I highly recommend this series. It's a fun ride. It ended wonderfully. It couldn't have ended any better, in my opinion. So it is worth, and you can binge the whole thing now. You're welcome.
The next series on my list is the second book that we read for our Book of the Month series. I actually messed up. We read Illuminae in May, talked about it in June. We read Renegades, talked about it in July. So I fell in love with the Renegade series when we did this for our Book of the Month. It follows 2 superheroes. One is part of the Renegades, which is the good guys, and then the other character is a part of the Anarchists, which are the bad guys. I put that in quotes because when you follow the story, you're kind of put back and forth between the 2 different views, and you're like, that doesn't make sense, that makes sense. But then there's other points where like, oh, but what they're doing doesn't make sense, but that makes sense. So you're just kind of following both sides, and you're like, I don't know who I agree with, which made it for an amazing story, and the 2 characters, the way they interact, and just their developed relationship, and the character development. One major aspect is the quote-unquote bad guy actually infiltrates the good guys as kind of like an undercover agent to try to bring down the good guys from the inside out, which is really interesting and kind of sets up for a very epic story, and I really love this. Highly recommend.
Going off of that, on my list was Marissa Meyer's other series, the Lunar Chronicles. I read this earlier in 2019, I think like February or March, somewhere in there. And so Cinder follows basically like Cinderella in space in the future. And it's awesome. So Cinder, who is our main character, is a cyborg. So she has different pieces of her that are actually robot, and she's treated her typical Cinderella fashion by her stepmothers and stepsisters. And we follow so many other characters that Marissa Meyer weaved in these fantastical fairy tales. Book 2, we get Little Red Riding Hood, and then Rapunzel and Snow White, and they're just weaved in so seamlessly and beautifully. And I usually hate Cinderella stories. I fell in love with this. It was so beautifully done. I loved the whole series. This one is another 4-book series. So again, this one is finished as well, so you can binge it. It's great if you love Grimm's fairy tales. It is YA. It's not quite as like dark as Three Dark Crowns, but it does have some dark moments. It has some fun romance moments. It has some laugh out loud moments, and it's just overall, it's a great retelling that's different and fun.
It's on my list for 2020. My next book is Scythe by Neal Shusterman. I started this very late. I regretted waiting so long to pick this book up. This is one of my favorite books of 2019 for sure. This is 3 books long and follows 2 characters. It takes place a couple of 100 years in the future, where our society has kind of cleared out natural disease, natural death. So the bringers of death are these humans called Scythes, and they just show up at your door one day, and they don't call it killing, they call it gleaning. And so you follow 2 apprentices, and they originally start under one Scythe. Things happen, and then they get split up, but one thing that stays the same is that they're pitted against each other, so only one can become a Scythe at the end. And you kind of follow their relationship, you follow how they become who they are as Scythes, and it is really interesting. The reveals in this book, I loved this story so freaking much, and I'm really glad that I picked it up and can't wait to see how it ends.
The next series that I have is the Shatter Me series by Tahereh Mafi. Again, I read this one earlier in 2019. This one is not done yet. The final book comes out, I believe, in April of 2020. So this one is currently 5 books long, but will be 6, with a couple of novellas thrown in there. This follows a girl named Juliet who has a superpower, and when she touches people, they die. So she's been locked up in solitary confinement for about 1.5 years, and she gets broken out to be used as a weapon for the military, and she doesn't like that. Not at all. So we follow Juliet's story, and I really love this book because it really showcases anxiety. You're reading this from Juliet's point of view, and you're kind of following as if you were reading her thoughts. But the way Tahereh Mafi wrote this is some of her thoughts are crossed off as if to be like, no, I can't think that, that's wrong. Or her anxiety takes over and like pages are crossed off. And it's so beautifully done. I love the writing style of this, and I love this story. It is a little more romancy. It's kind of that 50-50 between action and romance, which I know some people don't really care for. And I typically don't, but the romance in this makes me just so happy. I highly recommend it. This one isn't one you can just binge though. Like I said, the final book, Imagine Me, comes out in 2020. But you can read the first 5 books and the other 2 novellas because they're all wonderful and glorious.
The next one on my list is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I was originally on the fence of how I felt about this book finishing it, but after a nice chat with Callie, I kind of realized that it is perfectly done. So this follows 2 twins, Jude and Taryn, as their parents are brutally killed in front of them, whisked off to Elfheim by their parents' murderer, who is actually their mother's first husband that she ran away from. And it also includes Vivian, their half-fairy older sister, and follows them how they are raised in this fairy world. She has a weird relationship with one of the crown princes, and it just kind of follows betrayal and some love you think is love. It's not love. It hurts.
You ever heard of hate to, like enemies to lovers? This is enemies to lovers to enemies to lovers to enemies to lovers. Yeah!
All across the board.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
And I loved the action more of anything, and some of the reveals in here you don't see coming, and I absolutely love this book. 3rd book, Queen of Nothing, came out in November, so I'm excited to see how it ends.
So the last one on my list, I actually only have the second one. I lent out the first one to a friend, and that is the Darker Shade of Magic trilogy by V.E. Schwab. This was actually the second series by V.E. Schwab that I read. I read her YA duology, Savage Song, first, fell in love with her writing style, and saw that she had adult series, and they were fantasy, and naturally, I grabbed them. So this follows a very intricate magic system between overlapping parallel universes. We have Kel, who can step between these universes, who meets Lila, who's a thief, and demands that she take her with him, and they go on this wild adventure to like different Londons, different worlds, different places that have different forms of magic, different levels of magic, and it's just so intricate and complex but it's not confusing when you're reading it. It makes perfect sense when you're reading it. This one is 3 books long. I fell in love with these characters. They are so well developed. The plot is amazing. The second book, which is the one I have here, is kind of like the Triwizard Tournament and centered around that, but with like magic battles, and it's great. There's an overarching plot, which is one of my favorite things, and it's a great series. This one is complete and you can binge it, so highly recommend it. If you're looking for adult fantasy, Darker Shade of Magic is the way to go.
So my last book is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, and this was our September book of the month. If you can't tell, most of my favorite series has started from our books of the month, which is okay. I just started getting into reading this year, so all the recommendations have come from my friends Callie and Sarah. So here we are. This follows Alina as she discovers that she has this rare form of magic, and it's supposed to save the world. So she is whisked away by the Darkling to kind of train her, and she goes through this hard training and kind of discovers who she is as a person, as well as how she wants to use her magic. And then there's big betrayals and big reveals, and all of a sudden, it's the end. So this is one of my favorites just because of the way the character development is, the relationships, the way they form, the way they end. It's really well done. So there are 3 books in this series, and then there are 2 duologies that kind of go along with the Grishaverse. There's the 6 of Crows and then the King of Scars.
Those are our top 5 series that we read this past year. This was pretty rough for us to, at least for me, to pick just 5 because I read so many series. I love series. So if you have any recommendations for us, feel free to comment below and give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. We post videos typically every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, but since it's Bookmas, it's every day.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram. Our individual and joint accounts will be linked below, as well as our Goodreads accounts.
And we will see you guys in our next one. Bye!